nothing changed what she saw. It was always blurry. And you'll be seeing some pictures at some point, and you might see her in rehab with an eye patch, and that was to help because she had double vision, she had blurry vision. Nothing was going to help. He said, I'll see you in 6 months. That part of her brain just has to wake up. 6 months later, she still has blurry vision. Okay, we went the beginning of November, and they tried the prism, nothing. They dropped this lens that had the pinpoint holes, and she could see some letters on the chart. I'm like, well, that was different. And then he's doing, left eye, right eye. Left eye, she says, I can see a white screen. I don't see anything on it. He dropped a lens down, and she almost screamed, there are letters on that board. Her vision now is nearsighted, and he says, oh, she can get glasses. So she's not real thrilled with wearing glasses. Her vision was perfect before this, but this means that that part of her brain has waken up and is processing the information because it was not correctable 6 months ago. So that's the end of the story. That's kind of where we are. So I'm going to pass it back to Bill, and he's going to tell you the beginning of the story.
The beginning of the story, January 23rd. About noon, I got a phone call from Jacob, my second son, that was living with, Becca was living with him and a cousin. She just moved in there in November. And probably the worst phone call I ever received in my life. I was in a procession on the way to the funeral, to the cemetery, and it just so happened I had given Jacob the day off. He was supposed to work that day, and looking back, God just placed everything in where it needed to be for this miracle to happen. But he found her unresponsive, not breathing. When he called me, he said she was cold, she's not breathing. And I told him call 911 and start doing compressions and don't stop until they get there. And essentially because he was there, he will forever be grateful that you were there to help her. So once I drove the fastest procession, I found out later I was doing about 55 on the way to the cemetery. I came back, went right to the house, and by that time the ambulance had taken her to the emergency room. Jacob had to ask them, beg them to keep working on her because she had no pulse, she had nothing. And they continued to work on her, took her to the emergency room. It was only about a 2-minute drive maybe from the house. And Christy was out of town at a wedding shower. And once we got all the kids, we brought the rest of them, Hannah and Luke, we went over to Jacob's house and we sat there for a while not knowing what to do. We hadn't heard from the hospital for, it was almost an hour maybe. And decided that needed to go over to the emergency room. And I took Hannah over with me. We arrived there, they immediately took us to the comfort room, which is not a place you want to be at in the hospital. And as soon as they said that, we thought she was gone, and the nurse was like, no, she's still alive. It took us in there, the doctor immediately came in from the ER, and he was spewing off a bunch of stuff that, potassium and whatever. He's telling me all the things were off the charts and just not where they're supposed to be. He says, you have a very sick daughter. And probably 4 times he said, I can't believe how cold she is. Her core temperature was 59 degrees. And he says, I just don't understand how that can happen. He says, I just hope maybe the cold is protecting her brain. And we know why it happened and how it happened now at this point. But they took her and they were gradually warming her up with blankets. By that time Christy was there, we were able to go back and see her. She's still unresponsive. this point was at Alliance Community Hospital, and they knew they didn't have the abilities to take care of her. The emergency room doctor, he said yes, we'll be able to keep her down here until we can find a place for her to transfer her. You can put the first one, I think, up on the slide up there. And they looked for a bed. This was during COVID and all that. And there's no beds open in Canton, Mercy, Altman. There was nothing in Children's, and the only place that was open, they said Cleveland Clinic has a bed in the ICU. Children's PICU. And they said, we'll be able to get her there. We're going to send a chopper down to get her. And at that point, we had to put her in God's hands and in the hands of these two people that took her in a helicopter that we didn't know what we were going to find once we got to Cleveland.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were going to find. In fact, we didn't know if we were going to be able to see her, spend time with her. We didn't, it's COVID, you don't know. And because of COVID, they had relaxed the requirements, the admission, whatever, for the pediatric ICU. And so she was at 18, still considered pediatric. We were allowed unlimited access to her, 24 hours a day, both Bill and me. If she'd been an adult, one of us, and not rotating, one of us would have been able to see her during visiting hours. But because she was pediatric, we were with her every single moment. He'd skipped, she had had the stomach flu, we thought, the day before. But we don't know now if that was a stomach flu or it was, what was the cause and what was the result of her blood sugar was 837 when they resuscitated her. Normal is you want it under 200. Her A1C was 18. We've got it down to 6.3, which is, yeah. The nurses all, yeah. So big change there. So she was diagnosed a type 1 diabetic. We had no idea. Now looking back, we're like, oh yeah, we see where the signs and symptoms were, and the doctors right away said, don't beat yourself up over it. You can't, all the what ifs, should haves, could haves, it doesn't matter anymore. This is where we are. That's helped me through an awful lot, just period, because it comes up and you say, all right, you look at it and you have to let it go. You just have to. She was on bags of insulin when we got up to Cleveland Clinic. I mean, bags. You think of an IV bag, a bag of insulin, and I don't know how often it was running through, but they would bring down the bag and say, we've taken the next one out of the refrigerator, so as soon as that one's done, the next one's ready to go. She was on bags and bags of, I wrote it down because I always say it wrong, sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, because her pH levels were so out of control. They were just, do we have the screen?
Yeah, slide 2.
Slide 2. Do you have one of the IV bags?
Slide 3.
There, is that it? The first night, her nurse never left the room, except that the computer was outside and she would go out and chart something and come right back in. She was going from the IV stands to her body, to the computer, back and forth, just non-stop. She never left us.
She didn't go to the bathroom?
No. The first 12 hours that she was, that 12-hour shift, she never left. Every IV, I counted 10 or 11 lights, and so she had at least that many. She had a rack of IVs coming out of her groin. She had them in her arms. They put on EKG, or EEG, to check her brain waves. That's not fun. She had seizures at the beginning. They determined that she had had strokes, her cardiac arrest. It was 18-year-old daughter who had never had a physical thing wrong except she had mumps. She was just, how do we go from a healthy kid to, she's had cardiac arrest, strokes, and seizures, and they're telling us there's nothing left in her brain. There's nothing left. In fact, that Sunday, so that will happen on Saturday. On Sunday, we were told, well, we hardly took any clothes or anything. We didn't know how long we were going to stay. We took like a change of clothes. We're like, we're going to go home, grab a change of clothes, and then we'll be back. And the doctor said, you don't want to leave. You'll feel very guilty if you leave at this point. Her kidneys are damaged. Her liver is damaged. She has brain bleeds. She has swelling on her brain. Her blood pressure is falling. Her heart has stopped once. It will stop more easily the second time. So we started praying and we started reaching out. And I don't know at what point I made this Facebook group just so I didn't have to tell so many people the same thing. So we started praying, and the CAT scan surprisingly showed she didn't have any additional brain bleeds, and there was no swelling on the brain, and they were able to get her blood pressure under control. And that day, like, these are the top requests, just turned around. By evening, the doctor said, you could go home now. And we're like, yeah, well, I don't think so. Don't think so. But I think I got kind of I'm sure they thought I was crazy because I did a lot of smiling and nodding. They'd be going through, okay, here's what's wrong now. And I'm with my mask on. Okay. Just tell me what we need to pray about, because we have this Facebook group in this church, and I have family members that are praying for her, and they just want to know what to pray about. And her one nurse would get she's like, you give me chills, because every time she'd come in, I'd say, here's what was wrong with Becca when you left. We prayed over it, and here it is now. And she's like, it just gives me chills. It just gives me chills, because every day God was answering specific prayers. Also, we had kept telling them, you're told when anyone you love is in a catastrophic event, what kind of life would they want? What kind of quality of life would they want? And Bill was, I don't care. If she's a vegetable, we will bring her home and we will take care of her. I don't know if I'm more, was the word pragmatic? We really meant me. So it would be me doing everything the nurses are doing, the feeding tubes.
Good, next slide.
Breathing, trach care, ventilator, up in the night. I know this is going to fall on me, and guess what, people? I'm getting too old for this, all right? What is that one up?
It's not
I see. It's horrible not being able to see. Oh, he snuck that picture, and I didn't even know that one existed. So they asked, what do you want? What do you think she would want? And we started saying, we are going to fight as long as there's anything to fight for. And I was told that got into her chart, so that everybody that looked at her knew this was our mindset, that we're fighting. And man, did we. I learned, we don't do hospitals. I had one baby in the hospital and the rest were born at home. And here I am turning into the advocate for my child that I don't even know what I'm doing. I have no idea. I just didn't know. So for us to have to speak up, Bill would listen, I would talk. He's surprised. Nobody's surprised.
Couldn't stop her talking.
No, you couldn't stop me talking. On Monday, then, cardiology came in, these three little ladies, and I swore they looked more like fairy godmothers than cardiologists. They were kind of frumpy and just little frumpy ladies. I think, okay. And they said, okay, so her heart is fine. And they all looked at each other and nodded. And I said, well, wait a minute. She's an 18-year-old that just had a cardiac arrest and her heart is fine. And they looked at each other and nodded and smiled. I'm like, so an 18-year-old can have a cardiac arrest and everything be okay? Yeah. She's fine. Nothing wrong with her heart, structurally fine. It hadn't been beating for an hour. It took an hour at least to resuscitate her. And it's fine. Who knows the answer to that one? 3-letter word. This was reconfirmed. She'd seen let me think, neurologist once we came home, and he's like, I can't find her report from cardiology. I want her to see another cardiologist. So August, she saw another cardiologist and then had another test done in the beginning of September. And she confirmed too, there is nothing wrong with her heart. There's nothing wrong with her heart. And she would look at her chart and then look at Becca and look at her chart. And she's like, you had a near-death experience. No, you had a death experience. And not many people get a second chance and get a recovery the way you do from what you've been through, or even a fraction of what you've been through. So the first week, we were told repeatedly, every day she doesn't wake up is less likely she's going to. I'm not sure at what point we started thinking her not waking up is a kindness because of what they were doing to her. You wouldn't, if you woke up and suddenly you've got all those tubes coming out of your body and you've got a tube down your throat, and there were other things that we've kept from the public that she was going through that it would not have been good if she'd been awake for. And we're just so thankful that God let her sleep. In fact, I had prayed one morning, I'd waken up and I'm laying there praying, wake up, Lord, just let her wake up. And I feel like John, I didn't know if I was in my body or in my spirit, and I saw a dark figure off to the side, and he held up his hand and said, stop. And I didn't feel like he was either good or evil, it was just stop. And I kind of changed the way I was praying, and I really feel like that was God saying, it's not time for her to wake up. That she's going to sleep until it's time for her to wake up. Her brain injury, we were told, was universal. No part could compensate. Like if you have a brain injury where you're in a car accident and you hurt one part, well, another part of your brain might be able to pick up. They said her brain injury is universal. No part of her brain has not been affected. So I started picturing her brain as a bowl full of jelly, just nothing, shapeless, useless. And we were told her brain stem, which does reflexes, has been greatly impaired. She had no response to light. I got to hating the flashlight when they'd come in and check her reflexes. Her pupils were fixed and dilated. It gave me a lot of anxiety when they'd come in with that flashlight. There was nothing there. She did not respond to any kind of pain. She responded to no stimuli whatsoever. But then one day, the nurse, one of our first nurses, and we liked her very much, her name is Shelby. She was part of our group at one time. I don't know if she still is, but if Shelby, if you're watching, you gave us a lot of hope when nobody else did. She would talk about when she wakes up, when she goes home. And this was when she was doing nothing. She had nothing. And one day she said, you see the number on the ventilator, the green number? I'm like, yeah. And she said, well, when it's 12, that's the vent doing the work. I said, but it's 14. She's like, yeah, that's Becca breathing over the vent. So some days it would be a little bit, maybe she'd get up to 18. She did get as high as the 30s. And then other days she would ride the vent where she just let it do all the work. But she was breathing. The MRI came in better than expected. It wasn't universal damage. It was, there's a bad spot here. There's a couple of spots here. There's some stuff here we're not sure about. The brainstem looks better than we thought. Everything was better than expected, and that neurologist who Anessa, we hated him, didn't we? Gwendolyn was going to start a posse, a gang, to go and find him in the parking garage and beat him up.
Nothing but bad news.
Nothing, but we hated to see. I'm like, you're a nice guy, but I don't like you at all. But he said, this is the best news I could have expected, could have hoped for. This is the best. It blew him away. I said, are you surprised at how much you know about the brain? He said, I'm more surprised about how much we don't know about the brain. She started that first week, she started grimacing and coughing. They would suction her throat, and she would make some faces and coughing is really weird, that's what they called it, but it had no sound because she had a tube down her throat. So it was just really an natural, yucky, yeah. Bill saw it first, and I'd walked in, and I'm like, what's she doing? He said, she's coughing. Like, coughing was something Shelby had told us to keep an eye on. That is showing that she is feeling some discomfort, and it is also a reflex. If something is run down your throat, you should cough. So that was week 1. So much fun. Yeah, she had no reflexes, no movement, no response to stimuli, and then her pupils started responding. Sometimes just one, sometimes the other. They were not equal, but there was a response, and they always, so first we're told she has no reflexes, she won't because the brainstem. And then when she started having reflexes, they would say, oh, it's just a reflex. You said that didn't work. And then if she would do something one day, I'm like, oh, look, she's doing this. It's just a reflex. She wasn't doing that yesterday, and now she is. So is it that same week? I have this open like I can read anything. I don't have glasses on. I don't know what it says. I don't know. I have them in my pocket. Her finger twitched. February 3rd, her thumb moved. I think you saw it. It's just a reflex. And then her other finger moved. Oh, I'm going to have to move this.
Week and a half in the ICU, and we saw no response.
No.
That she did deliberately.
No. Right, other than coughing and sometimes a pupil responding to light, she had no reflexes, no movement, no nothing. One day they were checking and rubbing a metal rod across her fingernail, and it twitched. And I was like, oh, it's just a reflex. She didn't have reflexes, remember? They were very forgetful. Okay, this was so exciting. She coughed one day and opened her eyes. February 1st, she coughed and opened her eyes. She started biting and fighting the tube down her throat. This is also the day, I actually need to go backwards. We knew that this family meeting was coming up on Tuesday, and the family meeting was going to be about whether or not to put a vent in a feeding tube in because she'd been intubated. They wanted to get the intubation out. And we had one side wanting to do an immediate, just extubate her and see what happens. The other team wanted to just do a trach immediately. Don't try extubation without doing surgery for the trach. Unfortunately, our family was divided on that. I was on trach. He was on team, let's just go for it. The doctors, same. The doctors were torn. So we knew Monday morning that this was going to be happening Tuesday afternoon. They call this a family meeting. That sounds really fun and loving and kind, but it's terrifying and it's horrendous. It's the family with the doctors. We were seeing nephrology, neurology, and the PICU doctor, although I think nephrology backed out. I think it was just neurology. And then palliative care. Palliative care, they were fabulous, but when somebody walks in and says, I'm from palliative care at the bedside of your child, that is not who you want to see. If you have ever known anybody in hospice, you know what palliative care means, but they were fabulous, fabulous. It was my support. In fact, in rehab, the palliative care nurse would come and visit me there just to give me somebody to talk to. The palliative care would be there as kind of an advocate for us. So we advocated for Becca, she advocated for us, just keep pathways open with the doctors. So we all understood each other. Doctors talk a different language than real people sometimes. Sometimes. So Monday morning, I wake up early, and I was praying, and I felt God say, ask for one more day. So I'm like, okay. Ask for one more day. How am I going to do that? Our meeting comes up. They're ready to extubate her. They've taken her off feeding, so since midnight, she's ready to go. We'll extubate her. Neurology did not want her extubated because any chance of any loss of oxygen could be, adding devastation on top of devastation. Bill and I we weren't in agreement. Their kids weren't all in agreement. What should we do? What is the safest? What is the best? My questions were, what if you extubate her and she needs to cough and she can't do it well by herself? Like, well, we just don't have that ability to help her as much. They didn't know if she had any tongue control. They didn't know if she could swallow on her own. So those are things very important, that you be able to swallow and not swallow your tongue. So they're ready to do it, and I said, can we have one more day? Just we need to talk to our kids. So that was my little excuse in my out. Yeah, not God told me to ask for one more day, because they already thought I was crazy. And they're like, sure, no problem. By the end of the day, they'd found a blood clot had formed in her groin and would need surgery. And really, if we had extubated at that point when they did surgery, they would have probably needed to reintubate. And it just like, we just had such a peace that this all worked, that one day was what we needed. All of us were on the same page. The doctors were all together. Bill and I were all together. We all agreed. And so by the end of the week, she'd had a filter put in to catch this blood clot should it break loose. She had a tracheostomy put in, and a feeding tube all in place. We just had so much, you go from we don't know what to do. And I asked my sister, who's a nurse, what is the right thing? And she's like, I can't tell you what's the right thing, because there is no right thing. Whatever you do is the right thing. Like, that sounds like a cop-out to me. But it was the right thing, and we just knew. And there's so many times that we were going by feeling and going by, that still small voice, because we didn't know. We've never walked any road like this before. Palliative care. Okay. Also that Monday, I forgot, I skipped that. That Monday when God had said, ask for one more day, this doctor who was new for this week, he saw a new doctor for each week. And he sat at the foot of her bed, and usually if the doctors were going to say something negative, we'd tell him to take it out of the room. He sat at the foot of her bed, and he waved over her body that we had only seen a finger twitch, some drooling, not much. He waved over her body and said, if this is all you have in 6 months, this is all you're going to get. I didn't like him either. And then the next day at the family meeting, he said, if we extubate her, it gives you a chance to let her go. I wish I remember who he was, because I don't like him. I guess it's good I don't. It's protecting me from, all right. Yes, yeah. Say that again.
Protects her from saying mean prayers over him.
I don't know his name. That by the end of the week, he said, I'm going to put in a call for rehab and see if they can get her into their minimally aware program. Same guy. Because he saw God move from Monday to, I think that was Thursday. In that short time, the pinky started moving. She started wiggling her toes. She started coughing more productively. Her eyes would follow your voice. No, if you're a man. She would follow her dad's voice. She would follow the male neurologist's voice. She would not follow a female's voice. But the neurologist, he's like, I saw her do it. She followed my voice. She didn't follow my colleague's voice, the female. She started crying, like as if in pain. Then they also had warned us about neurostorming. Neurostorming, I like to think of it as, okay, so if there'd been a big snowstorm and you need to go out and shovel your sidewalks, sometimes you're going to hit the sidewalk and sometimes you're going to hit the grass off to the side. So neurostorming is the brain trying to find pathways that have gotten lost because of the injury. And when it would be trying to clear those pathways, sometimes it hits the grass. and it's not a good feeling. And it would cause her blood pressure to go up, her heart rate to go up, her temperature to go up. She would have signs of restlessness, of discomfort. Severe cases, it can cause seizures, and this can actually go on for years. We didn't tell our kids all that could be involved. Neurostorming scared me a lot. And I took a selfie of myself in the hospital one day, and I'm like, God, I'm not ready for this storm. And he, almost as loud as could be, he said, yes, you are. And the storming started. But fortunately, we didn't have seizure activity with it. The most unfortunate part of it was the day that they wanted an EEG put back on, and then we could see the storms on the screen before her body started responding to it. You could see this storming activity, and that was horrible, and I had to leave the room. She was on dialysis continually for, I think, 2 or 3 days, and then she had it intermittently for 3 more days because her kidneys had been damaged. The dialysis, I'm trying to get this straight, I've messed this up before. Dialysis caused storming, and when the storming happened and her blood pressure would go up, it would stop the dialysis machine. And so then we're just in this cycle of her storming and dialysis shutting off. And I didn't think that dialysis session was ever going to end. And I started just talking to her and rubbing her legs and just stroking her face. And the dialysis technician, nurse, said, I think you really helped calm her down. When the one day she was storming evening with that EEG on, and I had to leave. I just couldn't stand watching those storms, seeing them on her body and then seeing them on the screen. And I was out in the waiting room, and I remember saying, beg God, I'm begging you. And he laughed at me. He said, you don't have to beg. And I called or texted or whatever 5 people, and I need you to pray specifically right now. We've got to get these storms stopped. I can't stand this anymore. I went back to the room a few minutes later, and she's calm. And everything, all of her numbers are back down to normal. And I said, Bill, she stopped storming. He said, yeah, about 5 minutes ago. Like, oh, right about the time I had people start praying for her. And she'd started up a little storm shortly thereafter, and he went and talked to her and got it right down. And I'm not sure that wasn't the last real storm that she had. I think she's had a few since where just she would get hot and restless. But to that extreme, I think that was the end that night that I had called these 5 people, pray with me, we can't stand these storms anymore. So you can clap for that because that's pretty good. PT and OT started coming, physical therapy and occupational therapy. Gave us some ideas of things to do with her even while she was still asleep, working on her muscles and muscle tone. I don't think you got pictures of her with her fancy boots, did you? She had different boots to help her to not get bed sores and to keep some flexibility in her feet. She hated them, and before she ever woke up, she could figure out how to disconnect them and take them off. She figured out Velcro, and that's heavy-duty Velcro. She had blow-up socks. She hated those. I did not know how to disconnect those blow-up socks. One day, I watched her hand go down her leg. So she got to that little connector, she grabbed it, and she yanked as hard as she could until it disconnected that sock. She wasn't awake. I couldn't figure it out. I'm years old, and I couldn't figure it out, and she did it in her sleep. Her eyes started avoiding light. Her feet got ticklish. Speech came and checked her tongue and everything. She had to have restraints because she started pulling things out. Her trach, she loved to pull out her trach because who wants to breathe? She got really sneaky. She would be scratching her nose, and have that sucker out so fast. Any tubes? I did take a few pictures of this one time. I walked in and she threw her hand over the back of her head, and there are tubes hanging behind her, hiding them from her. And she's trying to find those tubes back behind her head. We got her sugar under control. Her creatine, oh, I hate that word. Thank you. Those are her kidney numbers. Got them lowering and lowering and lowering. She was on formula. She went to a CPAP instead of the vent because she was able to breathe on her own.
What date's that?
That was really quite a way back. CPAP overnight then. This was in February. No more seizures. The one day I watched her sleeping and she scratched her nose in her sleep. I'm like, it was like the most normal thing I've ever seen. Just to scratch her nose. Let's see, we started preparing to go to step down. Step down, she completely changed.
Next couple slides.
She was purposely, disconnecting her socks. She was squeezing. Every day I would rub her fingers and I would tell her what finger I'm rubbing and just go through each finger. I would have her just touch different things and tell her what she was feeling and talk to her about textures. And the one day, she grabbed my hand and she rubbed each finger and walked to the next finger and rubbed it and went to the next finger. The same way I had been doing to her. She still wasn't awake and she was rubbing my fingers. She got a fall wrist bracelet because she was throwing her legs all over the place, and it made nurses very nervous when both her legs are hanging off the bed. I put fall risk up in my bathroom on this little sign. She was insulted. I'm not a fall risk anymore. She moved to step down on a Saturday. Sunday night. Saturday was the 13th. Sunday the 14th, that night, she would have an aide that stayed with her all the time because she was a fall risk. And she pulled out her own trach all the time. So this aide didn't know her, had never seen her before, and she got really freaked out when she sees Becca's mouthing words. She asked somebody else that came in, is she supposed to be doing this? That was the first. She started mouthing words. She would nod and shake her head. She started mouthing words. She would nod yes and no appropriately. I was brushing her hair and I asked her if it hurt and she shook her head no. At one point, this was a big one too, Bill said, open your eyes, and she shook her head no. And at that point, she had moved her head, but mostly to get comfortable, but that was the first purposeful, I heard you, I'm responding to you. So the responding was just starting.
That was 2 weeks after the incident.
Yeah. So they still didn't consider her awake because she would respond, but she had no initiative whatsoever. They tried to put her in chairs. They had her sitting up. That scared the life out of me. Then she'd want to sit up. And she's no baby. She's a strong little girl. And then I would say, oh, you're so strong. She would try to move forward in the bed more. And I cannot hold you in this bed. Then they had her stand up. That's even more scary because now does she not just want to sit up, she wants to stand up. And she was a 120-pound big baby who had drunken legs or maybe didn't have any legs. It was terrifying. No legs. Jello legs. On the 18th, I said, is Becca awake? And they said, yes. When we'd walked in the room, she was sitting in the chair, and the nurse said, I told you your mom and dad were coming. And she broke out in a big smile and started crying. And she knew names, and she wanted to talk to everybody. She wanted to talk to Hannah. Hannah. She wanted to talk to Jacob. She wanted to talk to our dog, Gus. We video called her boyfriend, Owen. We video called everybody. Who else do you want to talk to? Gus. Like, you know, Gus is a dog, and he can't talk back, right? I want to talk to Gus. So that was the day. This was the 18th of February. Her incident was on January 23rd, that she was purposeful in communication, and she initiated activity. She laughed at funny things. She watched The Office with Bill and then asked him why he thought it was funny. What else? She remembered family jokes. When she was still in PICU, I told one of the doctors, I said, she'll be very concerned how much money this is costing. And she's got insurance, but she's going to be concerned. He said, she's not going to care about any of that. What made Becca is gone. She was very concerned about that. And I overheard her tell Owen one day, my parents are broke. I said, why? Because this costs a lot of money and you spend it all on me. Oh yes, and she had gone to a dentist and had a root canal before it had happened and had a balance. And she pestered and pestered and pestered her dad to make sure that bill was paid because she owed them money still and she didn't want to be in debt to that dentist. Yeah, that part of the real Becca's gone. Yeah, so much like her. She wouldn't keep the monitors on. She was supposed to have a pulse ox on. She wouldn't leave that on. She wouldn't leave anything on. Her aide finally just gave up. She just couldn't do it anymore. She responded to music. She got to ride in a wheelchair out of the room for the very first time on the 19th. She got a physical therapy dog visit.
Yeah, next slide.
She loved that dog. That's kid. What else? She started talking a lot, but they usually didn't seem to be any known language known to man. Sometimes I thought maybe she was breaking ancient curses because she would sit cross-legged with her head down, scowling and just saying very dark things that you couldn't understand, and then she would look up and say, "You don't understand. You don't even know. No, we don't." And I was really worried at night when the new aide would come in for the night. I'm like, "You are in for it. She's not going to stay in bed. She is drunk. And the thing she says, even though you can't understand it, it's going to scare you." She called Jacob. She wanted to talk to Jacob. And he was a little afraid, weren't you? He's like, "I don't know what she's saying, but I think she's mad at me."
I want your sweatshirt.
I want your sweatshirt. I don't even know what sweatshirt. Yeah. So she did a lot of talking, and we found out eventually that what she had was called aphasia. Nouns were very, very hard. Speech came in and hold up a toothbrush and a hairbrush. What is this? Hairbrush. Is this a toothbrush? Yeah. Is this a spoon? No, it was a fork. She just couldn't. She'd get close, but she couldn't get the right words. It wasn't until March 9th that she would look. I could say, "Who am I?" and she could say, "Mom." I think it was March 9th as well that we said, "What is your name?" and she said, "Becca." She would get other people's names somewhat. Sometimes she would call Owen. What did you call him? Stinky, or she would call him pet names because she could not remember his name. Oh, sorry. She did a lot of echoing at this point. You would think she's carrying on a conversation until you started really listening and realized she's just saying everything that you said back again. Yeah, she had a lot to say. And Bill one time said, "I don't know what you're saying." And she just smiled, and he's like, "Do you care?" She
One
just
point
liked
when
it.
she was trying to get out of bed, and we'd have her stand for a little bit, she's like, "Okay, let's go."
Yeah. Just head for the door.
You can't leave.
You can't leave. So she wakes up completely different, and I wanted to say, we never it sounds really weird. We never asked why did this happen to us. It was more, we always felt, why is God using our family like this? Her Facebook group grew to over 3,000 people. Last I knew, it was over 11 countries, and it spanned all around the world, every time zone. At some point of every day and night, somebody was praying for her. Why would God use our family? We are nobody special. We didn't do anything great. She's not a perfect child. Trust me, she's not a perfect child. But that's for another story, right? Why did God choose to use us? We have lost loved ones before and since. Why not them? I know almost every family in here has lost somebody in this past couple of years. Why did he choose to save our daughter and not save your loved one? I don't know. And I tell you what, that throws some guilt on us sometimes. Why us? Why were we protected? Why did God say, hey, I'm going to use this girl? When she first woke up, when we got to rehab, she started realizing what was going on. Even in step down, when she was awake, most things didn't seem to bother her very much. She's now a diabetic, so she's getting finger pricks constantly and getting insulin. But once we got to rehab, her self-awareness started coming too, and she was aware of pain, and she was aware of just things that were going on, much more self-awareness, and so everything hurt. And she would say, why do I have to live through this? That doesn't even mean anything to me, so. Why do I have to be alive? Why am I even alive when everything hurts and they're hurting me all the time? Her head hurt, her stomach hurt, her legs hurt, she had neuropathy, her feet burned, and pins and needles, and she felt like she was being electrocuted, and that would go sometimes into her wrists and elbows. Mainly it was in her feet, but occasionally it would hit her hands and her arms. Why do I have to do this? Why am I alive? And we're like, you just killed me there. You know, why are you alive? Because we have been begging God to keep you alive here for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, that's why. But she got past that to where she has said, if I went through everything I went through for one person to believe in God and to believe in his abilities to heal, and you know, could you say it better than me? I'm stumbling through it, okay? It was worth it. It was worth it for one person. The finger pokers at the hospital are horrible, and they're cruel, and they're painful. And she would have a Band-Aid on every finger, and it got to where when the Band-Aids, all the fingers had Band-Aids on, we take them all off and start again. And then she learned, she couldn't stand blood. She's diabetic. She can't stand needles. We couldn't say, we gotta check your blood. Don't say that word, don't say that word. So the one nurse would say, we're here to check your so she eventually was able to check her own blood before we left. She was able to help give her own shot. Now she does all of that by herself. She can give all of her shots. She does all of her blood work. She does all of her carb counting. Occasionally she messes up, but don't we all? She gave herself 13 units when she should have had 8, and so we ended up calling 911 over that one. But I know there was something important in here. I want to really quick say a couple of more things. Really quick. Look how fast I just went through all that. When she first got to rehab, she could count to 5. If they told her the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 first, then she could do it. She could say the alphabet to G, same thing. Actually, they said the alphabet to D, and she was able to continue it out to G. She couldn't read. She could not write. She had lost all use of her right arm. We don't really know why. I felt like it kind of got left behind. All of her IVs and everything were over there, and that arm just kind of got pinned down. We never got any explanation for why she couldn't use her right arm. Her left arm had to take over. I don't know if there's rehab pictures. Sometimes some of the rehab pictures, she's using her left hand to make her right hand and right arm work.
It's like 3 or 4 slides up.
3 or 4 slides up, he said. So we don't know, but when her right arm started working, her left arm stopped. She had to do everything with her left, and then when her right finally woke up all the way, the left one said, "I'm done." Break time, yeah. I've done enough work. Well, she'd had strokes, and it had affected the left side of her body. That left arm has damage from the stroke. That left leg has damage. And the fact that she was able to use that left arm for as many weeks as she did to take over for her right, I mean, that right there is miraculous, I think, because they did a lot of work. A lot of work. A lot of rehab was more psychological than physical, I felt, way more than I was expecting. She had a lot of issues that had nothing to do with getting her physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. A lot of those issues were psychological. A lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. She was throwing up every single day. Her feet hurting. All of that was just, it was hard. Oh my goodness, I just looked at the time. Don't look at the time. Stop. It was so hard. It was so much more than getting her physical body back. It was psychological. It was spiritual. I think anytime you're feeling discouragement, that's a spiritual battle. And we had a lot of discouragement. We had on every board of every room she was in, when I don't see it, he's working. When I don't feel it, he's working. Because we didn't see it and feel it, it seemed like forever. And when I go back and look and see it was only weeks, it's just amazing that, how did that seem like forever? She had brain fatigue, and when her brain would get too tired, she would have a physical response. One night she just started twitching. We thought she was having seizures at first, but she was able to talk, and her eyes were fine, but her muscles just started going crazy. She would disassociate. That's my fancy word for it. She would become very childlike, probably around a 5-year-old. She wouldn't necessarily know who we were. She didn't know her name. I said, "What's your name?" "Little girl." I'd show her a picture of a dog. "What's the dog's name?" "Big dog." Just Rufus, sometimes Rufus. She saw somebody, she was walking to the bathroom, and she was in a state after a very stressful day. And somebody said, "Oh, look at her walking." And she said, "Why wouldn't I be walking? I have legs." And then she sees a boy in a wheelchair. And I'm like, "Shh, shh, 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 shh. Don't. And she's like, "Why is he wheeling?" And I'm like, "Shh, shh, let's hurry. Doesn't he have legs?" No. She had night terrors, that was terrifying. And this was all from just her brain was just too tired. She seemed to be awake. She was talking. She closed her eyes, opened her eyes. She didn't know who we were. She thought Bill was a monster. She didn't know anything that was going on. The monster's coming to get me. She's just frantic and hysterical. She closed her eyes, and she was back. Oh, Mom, you're here. I was stuck. I couldn't get out. She was stuck in a nightmare. And it happened again. She closed her eyes, and she's back into this terror where she didn't know us. That was pretty awful. She saw demons. I don't know if those were caused by medication or if there were actually demons in our room. She wasn't afraid of the demons. She yelled at them. And I prayed. And texted Bill and said, "You know what, we need to pray because she sees a demon in our room." Yeah, she's just yelling at it. "Get out of here." Her memory, she went from 59 degrees. There's nothing left of her brain. Becca is not who she was. Becca remembers so much. And at first she would sometimes say, "Oh, remember this," and we're having to go, "Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten about that." Her memory, I said, was like a file cabinet. If all your memories were in file cabinets and each in their own folder, it was like once she found the drawer and could open it, and then she could read each one of those files, and then she remembered everything. before that started happening, she missed people. And she thought a lot of things had just happened. She missed my mom like she had just died. And she said, I didn't get to tell her goodbye. Well, my mom had been dead for 4 years. She did. I told her she was 18, and she freaked out. She thought she was 16. She thought she lost 2 years. I told her repeatedly, it took the longest for her to believe that Sarah was 16 at the time. No, she's 14, she's 14. And she would just get really panicked, and I'd have to go through, remember this happened, remember that happened. She did not think she remembered anything about the hospital until she had her trach removed on March 9th. She's like, I don't remember. People would ask about the trach. She's like, I don't even remember having it in. And then I would have to talk, you remember this happening, remember that. But once she remembered. So that was very cool. Hypersensitivity, she was very sensitive to light, sound, odors, bugs, tiny bugs. She could not see, but she could spot a tiny little ant from the toilet. There's ants in here. Where are there ants? She cannot stand bugs. She's walking down the hallway at rehab, and a spider dropped right down in front of her. It was terrible. She couldn't stand the sight of blood. That was great, as since she's been home, most of those have completely resolved. You don't like bugs. They're bugs. But she was really, it was really bad. She has to kill bugs for Owen. A few takeaways. Miracles can be slow, they're not instantaneous. And I remember Anessa saying this to me too. In the parking garage at the hospital, I was hoping a miracle would just happen. But sometimes they're slow. We had some fast miracles with her, but we had an awful lot of slow ones. I believe that her getting her vision back to where it's correctable, that is a miracle, but it was a 6-month-long miracle. I do believe that it can be better, that she's not going to be stuck with glasses her whole life, that God can continue the healing to where she doesn't need them anymore. We believe that even though type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, that her body decided her pancreas is a foreign body and it should to take it out. And you don't get better from type 1 diabetes, and there is no cure. But we believe that God could heal that pancreas and give her a fresh one. He did fresh in her brain. He can do fresh in that pancreas. We need to keep hope and reality balanced. If you ever wonder, err on the side of hope. I kept saying that over and over again when the doctors would tell us bad news. Okay, but there's some hope, and I have to hold on to hope, otherwise I'm going to drown. And I would know that I was getting out of balance when I would start to go under. I have to get my eyes on the hope. Sometimes it's not about the rock, it's about the ripple. Your life is a rock, and when you drop into the water and you feel like I'm drowning, what's going on? Why is this so rough? And you don't realize that when your rock hit that water, you started a ripple. And your ripple bumps into somebody else's ripple, and it changes their ripple. And their ripple changes somebody else's ripple. It's about your ripple when you're going through hard times. What's your ripple doing when people are seeing your life and seeing what's going on? Satan is looking for weaknesses to attack you. If you're fearful or tired or depressed or discouraged, it's time to kick his little tushy out of there, because that's his business is messing with you, and we don't have to let him. I am going to close with this verse that I was just flipping through this book that palliative care gave me. It says pediatric palliative care on it. And I was just flipping through it yesterday, and I have a scripture written down, just the reference, and I had no clue what it was when I wrote it. I have no idea. And I looked it up, and this is what it is. Psalms 91, 14, 15, and 16. And I'm going to change it a little bit, and you can change it for you. Because Becca loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue her, and I will protect her, for she acknowledges my name. Becca will call on me, and I will answer her. I will be with her in trouble. I will deliver her and honor her. with long life, I will satisfy Becca and show her my salvation. And I can't thank all of you enough that pray. If you only prayed for us once, if you gave us financial help, 5 cents, I don't care. You have blessed us, you've blessed our family, and you've kept us going. Your prayers were incredible just for us. If it didn't do anything for Becca, which it did, if it didn't do anything for Becca, it did for us just in an incredible way. Anything else? Pastor?
Thank you so much for sharing that. Before we close, and we want to pray for anyone that's in the middle of needing your miracle right now. Anybody else in the family have something that they wanted to share, need to add to, maybe something God told you or spoke to you through this process?
I really felt God during this whole thing telling me specifically that what we're going through now, any physical issue that you're going through is not just a physical issue. It is a spiritual battle that you are fighting. I've always been a pessimist. I always see the bad side of things. You say, hey, I need to talk to you. My mind goes, worst case scenario, like end of the world, like this is it. My mom always said, if there is a silver lining, Hannah can find the cloud that the silver lining is attached to. So the whole time Becca's in the hospital, my brain is, this is it. This is the last day we have with her. Every day, every second, that's where my brain goes to it. So every second of every day, I had to fight to tell my brain that no, this is not it, because she's still alive and God still has her. And I had to continuously fix my eyes on God and keep going, because my brain wanted me down. The devil wanted us down. He wanted us to keep our eyes to the ground and to only see the negative when that's all we were being told was the negative. So if you guys are going through a spiritual battle or you're going through a physical hardship right now, that's where the devil wants you, is he wants you down. He wants you looking at the ground. He wants you to only see the negative. He wants you to only see the gray clouds. But there is a silver lining, and that silver lining is Jesus. And he has you in his hands. And if he can raise my sister from the dead, he can do anything.
Well, here's how we're going to close. I know that the stories will continue to be told. I encourage you to come up and talk to the family, and there'll be years that you'll be able to share and pull on these experiences, these testimonies. It's what Scripture tells us, that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. You've heard this family's testimony. You have a testimony. And maybe right now you're right in the middle of that testimony. You're right in the middle of that miracle. You're still on the difficult side where you're being told very hard things like that they may not wake up, or that if they do, this is all that you're going to get. You may be in the middle of the Lord doing something where you've seen some things happen, but it's still not quite where you want it to be. If you right now personally, or somebody you love in your family is going through something difficult, you're in the middle of that, or you're at the beginning, would you just raise a hand, because we want to pray together. And would you look around, if somebody near you has a hand up, would you just either put a hand on their shoulder, stretch a hand toward them, and if you're not near anyone, you can stretch your hand right up here towards the Gross family, because we know that there's still battles to be fought, right? The Lord has really won the war, and we walk out the victory that Jesus has bought for us on the cross, but there's still daily struggles with vision, with things like that. So we're going to close by praying for all the battles that we may be in right now. Would you join me in prayer? Father, we come to you this morning so thankful for what you have done in Becca's life, in the Gross family, and by extension, this church, and by thousands of people who have been touched by what you have sovereignly chosen to do in her body, to raise her from the dead, to give her new life, and to give a testimony, Lord, of what you are able to do. So we pray, Lord, today for all the other situations, Lord. We are already thankful for what you might do next in the person sitting next to us, in the person in the row behind us, and the person across the room from us. We pray, Lord, today for all the miracles in process, for the things that you are getting ready to do, for the things that you have done and we're still walking out, and we still need the faith to see you continue processing that miracle, Lord. That just like the man that you healed who could see people moving as though trees until, again, you put hands on him and he could see fully, Lord. Sometimes you do it as a process. And so, Lord, we pray for all those in the middle of the process right now. Give them strengthened faith. Lord, for every one of us here today, may we walk away knowing that there is a God in heaven who hears and responds, who heals and restores, and there is nothing too big for him to do. So we thank you, Lord, that you are that God that loves us so much. Let us walk forward into this Christmas season, remembering your greatness and your goodness and bringing whatever difficulties we hear around us to you in prayer, because you are faithful. Jesus, we pray all this in your name. Amen. Amen. Would you give the Lord one more hand clap this morning? Now would you stand with me? Girls family, again, thank you so much for sharing some very personal things and some other pictures that maybe not the whole world saw before. We just want to thank you. Would you take a few moments before you leave today? I know we're a little bit over our normal time, but would you greet somebody around you? If you got the kid in the nursery, would you go straight to pick them up? Because those poor folks would love to see your face right now if you got a kid in the nursery. But God bless you. Have a fantastic week. We will see you next Sunday.